Massive protests, calls for impeachment, charges of corruption. This is Brazil's political reality. It all came to a head on Tuesday with Brazil's largest political party making some big decisions. To tell us what happened, CCTV's Paulo Cabral joins us now from Sao Paulo. And Paulo, this is Brazil's largest political party, which has decided to pull out of the ruling coalition. What happened?
Well, look, what happened was more or less what people were already expecting it would happen. You know, for a while, the PMDB, the largest political party in Brazil, has not been united around the government, even though they were still until today formally in the government coalition. There were opposing forces within the party, some supporting the impeachment, some saying that the party should still be with the government. And then as the political and economic crisis deepened, it was clear that the forces that wanted to leave government started to gather strength, and this resulted in today's decision. So this is extremely significant, and it's important also to bring some context, you know, to tell you where this party comes from. It started supporting the Workers' Party government in the second term of Lula's presidency, when it was clear that the Workers' Party had a strong grip on power. And then they remained with the Workers' Party through the first term of President Dilma Rousseff, and when the second term started, actually the party was already more or less divided, but Lula and Dilma Rousseff still managed to get them on board. Well, this year, with all the crisis and the protest and the corruption allegations, and above all, a perception in the party that the power was shifting elsewhere, then came this decision of abandoning the government. You know, actually, the PMDB has been in pretty much all Brazilian government coalitions since the end of military dictatorship, and that's more or less how this party works. You know, they are a federation of leaders. They're not ideological in sense of being right-wing or left-wing. They are pretty much gravitating around power, and certainly now the PMDB has felt, as many people in Brazil, that the power may be shifting hands.
Now, does this move make an impeachment of Rousseff more likely?
Oh, certainly so. I mean, the PMDB has been the main supporting party of the government so far. It is the largest party in parliament, so this carries a lot of weight, of course. But let me tell you a little bit what President Rousseff could do at this point. Look, she's very cornered. The government is in a very tight spot right now. But even though the PMDB is the largest party in Brazil, they have 68 votes out of more than 500 in the Brazilian parliament. The parliament here is extremely fragmented. So what the government is now trying to do is to negotiate with smaller and with mid-sized parties to try to keep them on board, negotiating personally with representatives, with members of parliament, offering, for example, ministries. Even the PMDB has today controls nowadays 6 ministries in Brazil and hundreds of high-level positions, and these are openly used here in Brazil in trade for political support. You know, this is how Brazil has been operating for a while, and this is what the government is now trying to do. You know, they have 6 ministries and about 600 high-level positions to try and trade for support in parliament. It's not clear if it will be enough this time. You know, just to give you a last sense of how things are here, President Rousseff was expected to travel to the United States to take part in the nuclear security summit, and she has decided to cancel this trip, because if she went, Vice President Michel Temer, which belongs to the PMDB, this part that has left the coalition, would be the president for a few days. And certainly she wants him as far from that seat as she can for now.
Right, and you've got so much going on in Brazil right now. You've got this political crisis, you have an economic crisis. Do Brazilians have confidence in their country's ability to rebound from this?
Well, look, I mean, if you take all confidence surveys over the last few months, you know, be it industrial survey or the consumer confidence index, they are all extremely low. So this is the objective data we have. Your people are not confident in the future of the country. But now, you do have a part of the population, and particularly financial markets, you know, that clearly believe that if Dilma Rousseff goes and we have a government that would be headed by the PMDB right now, they would be more pro-market, and this could then make the economy rebound. This is the belief of some, the belief of the financial markets, certainly. Every time that impeachment looks a bit closer, you see the stock market going up and the exchange rate in Brazil appreciating in favor of the real. So certainly you have among the markets a perception or a feeling that things would get better in the case of an impeachment. As for the general population in Brazil, Look, I can tell you that for many years during Lula's government, there was really a peak of optimism here in Brazil. People had a perception that the country was growing, that maybe it would not stop this time, that finally the phrase that Brazil is the country of the future would make some sense and future would be here. And then once more, this didn't happen. The country is really in a very deep crisis, and employment is going up. Many of the gains that had happened over the last years were lost. So no, people are not extremely confident at all right now.
Thanks, Paulo. That's CCTV's Paulo Cabral reporting from Sao Paulo. Joining me now to discuss this latest news out of Brazil, Paulo Sotero is the director of the Brazil Institute at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Via Skype from London, Carolina Matos is a lecturer in sociology at City University London and a long-time Brazilian journalist. And Rafael Salies is the Brazilian Operations Director of Southern Pulse, a consulting firm that specializes in Latin American public security. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Paulo, let me start with you. So we have the largest party in the governing coalition in Brazil, the PMDB. They voted to pull out of the coalition. What are the immediate consequences for the country?
Well, the impeachment process gains momentum in Congress. There are even timetables now being talked about that the House could vote on impeaching the president as early as 2 weeks from now. There is, though, an important detail. 2/3 of the 513 members of the House need an affirmative vote for impeachment. So the government has some space. This is 342 votes. The government has some room to maneuver and, for instance, convince some congressmen just to not show up. And they would not reach that number. The popular pressure, there will be more rallies, more popular pressure, etc. It's very difficult to make a prediction. Obviously, this is all quite sad because it is the second time in 25 years that we are using that mechanism to resolve a political situation. We impeached the president in '92, and this shows something that is fundamentally wrong with the political system. We need to fix this political system, make it really more effective, more representative, less fragmented. Democracy doesn't seem to be in any sort of danger in Brazil, but the challenge is very, very large, and it's a sad moment.
Let's go to Carolina in London. Carolina, what is your response to this latest development? As Paulo just told us, democracy is not in any danger in Brazil. But if the president is impeached, could it lead to any kind of instability?
Well, yes, I would have to disagree with him. Democracy is in danger in Brazil. What was not mentioned in any of the talks is that there is a strong opposition and anxiety in relation to this impeachment process, because it's being carried out by sectors of the opposition who are involved in corruption allegations, and which until now they have not been formally charged, as is the case of Eduardo Cunha from the lower chamber of Congress, who is going to be presiding behind the impeachment. There's been a lot of protests against this, and a sense that this is a certain soft coup, some people talk about it, which will actually put the clock back on democracy. So there is an anxiety for the future of democracy, the instability that this can create instead of stability. So yeah, so the markets are in a way happy, obviously, because of a more pro-market agenda. But the reality is that Brazil is a country that is one of the most unequal in the world, and it's trying to combine social democracy with market dynamics. And it has a long way to go to tackle human rights, which Amnesty International recently has pointed out that they have been extremely challenged in the last year because of the pressures coming from Congress and from conservative sectors from the opposition. So yeah, democracy is being severely challenged. And even the other leader, Marina Silva, who has also pointed out another option would be to have direct elections instead of the impeachment procedures. So there is a lot of instability related to this. So it's not as simple and clear cut as what was pointed out first, that the institutions are strong. There's been a lot of criticism towards Sergio Moro, and also how the sectors of the justice system have been having an alliance with sectors of the media. So it is a crisis that is deep and it's complex, and it goes beyond simply a bad government and a mismanagement.
Rafael, this is an important point. I mean, what are your views on this? Is Brazil's democracy a relatively young democracy? Its institutions, are they strong enough to withstand the kind of pressures that they're facing right now?
Well, I do believe that the democracy in itself is strong enough to overcome this moment. However, the system of democracy will become inherently unstable moving forward. If President Dilma is impeached, you are clearly moving into a situation where any government in Brazil in the future who is democratically elected but has a bad time in office can easily see a road where their opposition will try to depose them through impeachment as well. Right. And this is the same thing that a probable Temer government will have to look forward to if Dilma is impeached, where his position as president will be as unstable as her position. Let's look at the PMDB's plan to take over the government, which was released late last year. This plan will end up in various cuts in the federal budget and various cutbacks in social rights that the vast majority of the Brazilian population will not enjoy. This vast majority of the Brazilian population has not gone on the streets in protest. This is the lower middle class of Brazil. It is the majority of our population. It's the majority of our votes. They have not protested in favor of the Dilma government, who they do not approve of. They have not protested against it either, because they do not feel, one, welcomed at these protests, and two, represented in these protests and what they believe should happen with Brazil. The third point being is they really don't see an alternative to Dilma. So they prefer the devil they know to the devil they do not, right? And once you start cutting back on this already angered population, you start taking away from them rights that they have seen gained in the past 8 to 10 years. They will have an incentive to go to the streets and fuel instability. So you're looking at not only political instability as in how Brazilian political parties play the game in Congress vis-a-vis the executive and legislature, but you're also looking at street instability as a major part of the Brazilian population finally sees the incentive to go out and protest.
Paulo, take us through some of the political complexities of what is going on right now. So we have the PMDB, the party that's withdrawn. Its leader is the vice president right now. Yes. That's Michel Temer. And he has said that he's vowed to protect Dilma Rousseff. He said he will not support calls for her impeachment.
No, he now has changed it, obviously. He has moved on. He led this move for the PMDB to leave the government coalition. He's a professor of constitutional law, so he knows what he's doing in that regard. It is a very complex situation in which the PMDB now will try to form a new coalition with people that worked for previous governments, people that I think, all information we had, that some ministers, if Dilma is impeached, it's a big if she is not impeached, if they don't clear the 342 votes, according to a ritual that was cleared by the Supreme Court of Brazil in December, and that received applause from the Dilma government. The Supreme Court said the rules for impeachment in Brazil are such. They define the rules, they rediscuss the rules. If the opposition cannot clear the 342 votes that would impeach the president, sending it to the Senate to decide, like in the United States, President Dilma would not have any conditions for continuing, because she is very, very weak. Her government is not functioning anymore, so the crisis would prolong. The economy is in free fall. And you could have what Rafael just described. The fact is, what has been remarkable so far is that all rallies, all protests on both sides have been pretty civil, with no explosions of violence. This could change, but I think there is an anxiety in various centers of power in Brazil to resolve this quickly. Whether the politicians will be able to do that is a big question mark.
Carolina, what do you think that If there is anxiety in Brazil now on what's going to happen on the streets, I mean, could we have a situation where if there are changes that affect lower income groups in Brazil, we could see lots of people on the streets?
Yeah, that's right. That is already happening, a certain level of instability and anxiety that I mentioned, and that has actually been fueled in the last weeks, and especially the fact you saw people that are previously against the government going out in protest to uphold democracy, basically because people see that this situation that is basically been applied in a way which for some is almost dodgy or illegal. It's not totally, they see this as something being pushed by sectors who want to gain power for their own interests, and then basically their rights are going to be under threat. So yes, so totally, there's no guarantee whatsoever that the Temer government will put stability and will recover the economy quickly. Actually, the opposite is more the truth, because people have already said that only polls have indicated that 16 to 13% have any faith in a Temer government. So there is that possibility that it could even get worse and not better. And given everything that we've already talked about, you're looking at the ways in which many of people's rights and what they have been used to in the last 20 years, not even with the PT government, but also with Fernando Henrique and everything that has been conquered since the Constitution. All of this could start being under threat. So yes, we're looking at it getting worse and not better.